This is episode 1173.
Well, last year we saved, by our estimation, we saved about 100,000 hours across the company. We've got a goal to triple that this year, by the way, by eliminating what we would say is lower value and less necessary work to free up people to do more things in service of creating value for our clients. Again, we think that's a good marker, but another measurement you might look at is, if I looked at January last year versus January this year, we went from having about 200 custom AI-driven workflows that our people were using every day to over 2,800 in 1 year. So I think good markers of progress for us there, not to say that the job is done, because it by no means isn't. But the algorithms in our incentive business have gotten so good that, Jack, if you were to go into your local grocery store and you to go 3 times, we would be able to predict with a 95% accuracy rate when you're going to be out of things in your pantry.
There's a familiar question in finance circles. How do you become a CFO? We often assume it requires moving across companies, job hopping. But what happens when the path unfolds almost entirely within a single organization, and yet it still leads to the very top? This conversation is really about fit. While companies can open doors, it takes a certain individual, a certain mindset to walk through them again and again. What stands out here is that growth doesn't always come from moving on. It can come from going deeper and wider where you are. Our talk with CFO Rich Schmidt begins after this.
They say do what you love and the money will follow. My passion for making life beautiful led to a successful design firm, booming online sales, and a TV show. It also led to chaos, endless spreadsheets, and no single source of truth. We couldn't scale, so we chose NetSuite by Oracle. Now I get immediate visibility across the business, from revenue to customers and fulfillment. Clean, simple, beautiful. NetSuite is critical to the success of my business.
Hello, CFO Rich Schmidt is with us. Rich brings a rare combination of financial and operational leadership, having spent more than 2 decades, 26 years actually, at Inmar Intelligence, rising from analyst roles to the CFO office. That's right, he did it. He went the whole span. Along the way, he's led initiatives spanning M&A, enterprise procurement, and even large-scale infrastructure and data center transformations. His career reflects a steady expansion beyond finance into the core engines of business performance. Rich, welcome.
Thanks, Jack. It's good to be here.
So I have to just comment on that. Yes, Rich built his career. He does have a few professional chapters early in his career, but for the last 2.5 decades, it's been at Inmar. And Rich, so take us back, and let's first start with the early days. Where were you?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I get this a lot from folks when they join the company, and I'm first introducing myself to them, particularly those early in their career, and they want to know, Rich, what did your career journey look like? What advice would you give me? And I really do. I take them back to the beginning and I say, listen, I got out of school and I spent 3 years in public accounting, and it was a grind. I knew probably a year in that was not going to be my life. But there were things, particularly as time has worn on, that I really appreciated about that. And so some of those things are, you learn a really strong work ethic. You learn about a bunch of different industries in a pretty compressed period of time. So I audited everything from furniture manufacturing companies to automobile dealerships to nursing homes to construction companies. I mean, you name it. And I got to see a lot of different business models early in my career. Got to ask a lot of great questions from people who, were really seasoned and were really generous with their time with me. And so that was kind of the beginning. I then, as you alluded to, I transitioned into industry roles and sort of had a couple of controllership roles for a startup in the golf industry. I worked in a couple of other entities, and really during that period of time, I got a lot of foundational experience in those core finance activities, accounting activities, but I also started getting to do some operational things and some technology things, and started figuring out that where those things came together, technology, finance, operations. I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the variety of it. And I kind of discovered that what I liked the most about professional work was problem solving. And so I joined Inmar, as you said, in an analyst role, attached to the technology company at the time. It was an externally facing technology company. And I was very fortunate. I had a couple of mentors that kind of just set me free. They said, hey, we want you to go figure out what's going on over here. And I would come back and I'd give them my analysis, mostly, in finance analysis. And I was like, all right, well, what do we do next? They're like, well, we want you to go fix it. And I was like, what do you mean you want to go fix it? And they're like, yeah, we want you to go fix it. I was like, okay, well, who do I need to go talk to? And off we would go. And that led to me doing a whole lot of M&A work, whether it was diligence or integration work. Similar deal. We would figure out, okay, we need to fix these things in integration, and I'd bring the recommendations forward, and they're like, all right, now go get it done. I was like, okay. And so, those experiences beyond, I would do real financial analysis, a lot of, TCO analysis and recommendations based upon lots of research and collaboration with a lot of different groups. But then the experience of actually having to do it and manage projects and manage the outcomes and be accountable for that, those things really built, I think, a strong, readiness for moving into higher levels of management in the organization. And so I've been really blessed, for the experiences I've had throughout my career, and particularly here at Inmar. So
a big part, I'm going to make a guess here, of what you just described, those early years where you became sort of a troubleshooter,
yeah.
or, go fix it. Very often, maybe it was systems not speaking to each other. Maybe it was IT. You did an acquisition of a company that's just on an entirely different platform, and there was no way to synchronize, one with the other. Am I right? Is it what very often, because suddenly you become very specialized, I think. You've got a second specialization, let's say.
That really is kind of what happened. So the gentleman who was our CIO at the time, who I actually reported up through him, he was the person that ran this externally facing technology company. And Tom was an engineer by trade, but he was also one of the most well-grounded business people that I ever worked for. And his mentorship, as well as some of the people inside the IT organization, to be willing to educate me along the way and better understand, particularly all those things around data connectivity, understand what drove our costs, what, things we were doing for our clients were impactful, and how we could make a difference in solving problems. It really was a great founding. And if you think about it, at the core of finance, you've got to have data. You've got to have really good data. And if you don't have really good data, you're going to struggle to provide the kind of insights that are needed to effectively run a business.
You knew you were solving problems, so you understood the experiences you were having was valuable and would be rewarded. But at the same time, one wonders, did you think you're getting off the traditional finance career track? Did you think you were kind of going sideways in a way? What would you tell us?
That is a really insightful question, Jack. The answer for sure is yes. And I spent a lot of nights trying to grapple with, what do I want to be when I grow up in my early 30s? And I had opportunities internally and externally actually to fully jump out of the finance world, multiple actually. And I ended up sort of eventually getting comfortable with and embracing the duality and the multidimensionalness of the things that I did, right? I kind of decided that instead of trying to decide which thing I was going to do, that I really wanted to try to make myself as well-rounded as possible. And while I had really deep domain expertise in finance, I developed a pretty deep expertise in IT infrastructure and operations along the way. And I really found out that that's really where I was able to be most valuable, is in the combination of those things. And along the way, I really found out that the key to all that was having great people that you did an effective job managing and mentoring, because ultimately they're the ones you have to depend on to deliver the results.
Could you have gone the CIO route? Could you have, Was there a possibility of, you joining someone as their vice president of technology?
I did have that opportunity on a couple of occasions. I did have the CIO report to me for a couple of years here at Inmar.
Yeah.
And so, ultimately, I decided that particularly for those developing software, they would rather have somebody who looks more like a CTO where they've done the coding themselves. Right. And we've got a great CTO here at Inmar who, is widely respected, not only for his chops, but also for his managerial chops. And so I'm super happy to have him as a partner and not have to be able to support him as opposed to have to be responsible for that at this point. So
Rich, again, your career is unusual in that, again, you were developed internally, and again, it had a breadth that allowed you to really experiment and learn lots of things. But at the same time, we always come back to this. Why were they successful in developing their CFO from the grassroots up? And it comes down to opportunities, but it also comes down to the person. I'm wondering, what is it that made you stay? There were opportunities, obviously, to jump, and you stayed. You mentioned good mentors, I think, early on. I don't know if they were with you the entire way, but, what is it that kept you there?
Yeah, so I think the first thing really beyond the opportunities, which kept me engaged, I mean, at heart, I'm a problem fixer, I'm a learner. And so that kept me engaged. Even the times when there were temptations, it seemed like the company's needs allowed me to find ways to grow, which I appreciated. I'm the son of an engineer, and I think I've been a tinkerer since I came into this world. So, at the end of the day, that's an itch that I just really have to scratch fundamentally every day. But the answer is really the people. And so, yes, I had a number of great mentors. I had a fantastic boss. The first 8 years I was here at Inmar, I had another good boss right after her. But the environment, the culture here, the caring that the people have for one another, the way that people support one another. You talked about my 26 years. Well, heck, when they celebrated my 25th year last year, we had a celebration for a group of folks, and I wasn't even close to the longest tenured person that was celebrated that day. We had at least 6 or 8 people just last year that were here longer than I was, some of which over 35 years. So, I do think that speaks a lot to the culture here that we do have at Inmar. And, a lot of that is a credit to our current CEO, Spencer Baird, but also to our founder and those, before Spencer as well. But our founder started the company in 1980. And, the way that he early on even after he retired, frankly, continued to support folks here at the company is just amazing. And it's something that, I don't come close to living up to, but I aspire to.
It sounds like along the way, M&A was something that impacted your career from the very early days when you're doing problem solving, perhaps, to later on as you got more involved in the deal making. Could you maybe tell us a little bit how your M&A expertise and philosophy evolved over the years?
I would say that it's ever evolving. M&A is, we've gotten a fair number of deals done over the years. I think in total, I've in some way participated and supported about 25 to 30 in total. But if, the number of deals we've looked at is easily probably 50 to 100 times. So, you get plenty of reps to refine your craft, right? And so, I would say there are a few key learnings that I would take away. One is the fundamentals really matter, right? The fundamentals of the business you're evaluating, both in terms of not only their financial performance, but what underpins that, right? Like, what is their track record in relationship with their clients? What is their track record in relationship with the people? Because ultimately, if those things are not sound, you're going to run into challenges down the road. And then, of course, the tools that you're using to do the job. And so you talked about this before. When you sign up for bringing in somebody else's tools, you really need to have a great plan for how you're going to integrate that and make it a part of your company, or make it the thing that your company uses, particularly if there's overlap. And I would say that that's an area of continued opportunity, not only for Inmar, but for everybody else. And there were success stories in there, things we did well. And there's, things that, at the next at bat, we'll be continuing to try to do better.
Well, we want to find out more about Inmar Intelligence, but before we leave this career segment here, I just have to come back to this. What advice would you give leaders building a career within a single company? And I would wonder whether there was one period where you felt sort of stuck or you weren't where you wanted to be for maybe 18 months or whatever it might have been. And you had to reach out and you maybe took a more proactive role. I don't know, but can you share with us what advice would you give that person who, I know I'm in the right company, I know it, but wow, I'm having a bad 12 months here.
Yeah. I think really good question. And I think there are three things that probably come to mind off the top of my head. One is it's really important that you've got a group of mentors, not just a single mentor, but a group of mentors that you can lean into to get, to look for opportunities, get advice, be able to safely share thoughts and get guidance, right? The second thing is, I think it's really important that you have strong relationships with the people that you work for, because you need to be able to advocate with them, but you need them to advocate for you, right? And I think it's a dual thing. Like, you've got to own part of your own destiny. You can't just let things happen. At the same time, you do, to your point, at times have to be patient. And then I think the last thing is be very open to growing laterally, not just vertically, right? Those experiences really do pile up. And, I can tell you for sure in the rearview mirror, that's super easy to see. In the time here and now, it is a lot harder to appreciate. So, and I would, you hit the nail on the head. There were definitely times when I was like, I'm banging my head across the wall here. And, I'd run into people who I'd gone to business school with and, graduate school, and they'd be like, "Hey, what are you doing? Are you still at Inmar?" Like, I cannot believe you're still at Inmar. And I would say, well, here's why I'm still there. And, I've got this new thing, or, et cetera. And so, if you'd have asked me in 2002, would I still be at Inmar in 2026? What my answer would have been. But now, looking in the rear view, like, I definitely don't have any regrets about that decision.
And is it, you were in grad school while at Inmar, or how did it work?
Yeah,
so
no, that's right. So, funny story. I got approached by my leader, and then by somebody a couple levels higher than that. The second time I got approached and suggested that I really ought to think about doing that, because I had alluded to being interested in it when I first joined the company, and we had a tremendous tuition reimbursement program. And so Cynthia and Nan kind of twisted my arm a little bit, and I said, okay, I'm going to make this leap, knowing that my wife was pregnant with our third child. So she was supportive. I'm super lucky for that, but it was a rough 2 years. Worked full time, did school full time, even though it was at night. I promise you, it was full time. So it was, that was a rough 2 years, but I probably grew in my own mentality professionally more in those 2 years than certainly at any time up to that point in my career.
Yeah, wonderful. And Inmar helped make it possible as well. So that's great.
They did.
Great stories.
They also put the things I was learning to work. So there was no rest on that front.
It was a wise investment. Yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you for that. Let's find out about Inmar Technologies now, though. And for those among us who might not know much about this company, tell us about it. What's it about today?
Yeah. So the company was founded in 1980 by a gentleman named John Whitaker. As I mentioned, he set out to solve a problem in the grocery, retail, and CPG industry. At the time, coupons were being accepted in the grocery stores from consumers. Paper coupons. Believe it or not, those paper coupons were getting sent to different providers of services across the country, and they were weighing them to determine what kind of value should be paid back to the retailers from the brands. Because remember, when you use a coupon at the register, the retailer is fronting that money on behalf of the brands who are issuing those coupons. So, and that is still a $1 billion plus a year transaction movement. So it's real cash. And back then it was a burgeoning industry that was growing tremendously in terms of the paper aspects of the redemption. And so John said, hey, there's got to be a better way. He worked as a marketing executive, and he saw an opportunity to basically, use technology, this new thing called the PC, right, to try to solve problems. And so they went out and they created an ability to get those coupons into a international location to enable them to be digitally captured. So get the data off of the coupon. Now they knew every single coupon that was captured, the value on it, and who it was due to, the specific store. And that was 1980. Yeah, so it was revolutionary at the time. I mean, today we're sitting here, it's like, it's nothing, right? But back then it was something. And so, he pretty quickly over, a handful of years was able to get this offering out there where they captured the data. They then invoiced on behalf of the retailers to the brands. And then they managed the money between the two of them, right? So they ended up solving this really large scale problem in a complex two-sided marketplace between retailers and CPGs who, often, are not the most transparent with one another. And that was the beginning of, the legacy for the company. And I think it's a great starting point because at the time that was a really complex, nasty problem. And it was a problem that was, lots of concerns on the retail side about whether they're getting their money back, lots of concerns on the CPG side about, hey, am I actually moving product doing this? Is there fraud, right, et cetera? And so it was a good example of the type of problems that Inmar actively embraced and looked to use technology and really strong governance controlled systems, right, that were highly compliant with regulations and everything like that to solve these complex problems. And so a lot of companies, I think, shy away from things that look really hard. I think a lot of the reason that Inmar has been successful and had such a long lasting and growth curve is because of the fact that we solve these difficult problems that a lot of people would shy away from. And we've been able to do it successfully and create value doing these necessary things. And so, we do that largely in what we call the MarTech world, which is really, these incentive and media services around trying to drive, consumer loyalty to our brands and retailers. And then we do it in the healthcare space, where we serve a large portion of the retail and hospital pharmacy, as well as the life sciences companies. So,
And are those, which segment is perhaps most strategic today among those? Is it healthcare or biosciences?
It's interesting, right? I think we have got important problems we're trying to solve for both of those groups. I think it's no secret that on the healthcare side, the costs are greatly impacting not only the patients, but they're also impacting the pharmacies tremendously and the community hospitals and even the large hospitals. And, this advent of all of these new medicines, which are, doing incredible things for us as humans, and the cost of them, however, right? So there's a lot of demand, but the cost is making that demand somewhat prohibitive for people. And it's squeezing the pharmacies who perform such an incredibly important function. And so, yes, we're doing a lot of work for them. We've got new products to help them try to become more efficient, to help them recapture more value when they return drugs to the supply chain. And we're proud of the work we do there. On the other hand, on the retail and CPG side, consumers are really strapped with the inflationary situation, and it's hit the grocery industry pretty tremendously, as I'm sure you're aware.
Yeah.
So the fact that, we are in there with them trying to leverage our tools, trying to leverage our technological innovation to drive more return for the dollars that they put to work, right, in order to drive those dollars to the consumer to drive them to purchasing action. And so leveraging the new technologies to do that more efficiently is something we're really excited about as well.
Now, could you give us a sense, again, you've been through a number of evolutionary chapters here yourself. You've helped lead strategic planning as well for years. We're wondering how the company's sort of financial strategy evolved alongside the business.
Yeah. That's an always on thing, right? Because the business continues to move. Having the capital you need in order to fund the growth is incredibly important. We've been, we've been owned by a number of PE firms. We've had sort of 3, what I would call major chapters, but we've had some other participants along the way as well. I would say each of the folks that were our majority owners, were good owners, right? They were in there with us. They were supportive. And, there's been a number of times when we've had to go and say, hey, we need to up our investment. Here's the things we're chasing. And, I think over time, we've done a good job of growing the company. It wasn't always a straight line, right? It never is. And it wasn't always like, all right, we put this in, you got this out tomorrow. It was more like, okay, we put this in and now we're going to go get more, capture more wallet share, or, hey, some of the time it is, hey, we started this new product and, some of the time it ramped pretty quickly. Other times it's taken a longer time to ramp. And so, but as a CFO, making sure that you have the ability to fund the investment needed to drive innovation, particularly in today's day and age, has never been more important. My team or teams over the years have probably gotten tired of me being a broken record, but I pretty consistently deliver the same message, which is if we're not moving forward, we're by definition moving backward. And this mantra of continuous improvement is something that I've been literally hammering for 20 years, and I'm going to keep hammering it because it's never been more true than it is right now. With the advent of all the new AI tools, right? So we've had RPA and machine learning for quite some time, but these generative tools with the LLMs, really have been game changing in a lot of ways. And so, it's one of those deals where you've got to embrace that and drive continued innovation, both internally and externally, or you're going to get left behind.
You touched on AI. Inmar has long invested in data infrastructure. We're wondering, how is AI now building on that foundation to create value?
Yeah, I kind of view that through a lens of 3 different things. So one is, how are we preparing our staff, right, to take advantage of these tools? The second lens is how are we measuring how the staff is using them? What impacts are we getting to our own operations? And then the third horizon that I look at is really, what are we doing with our products and that is benefiting our clients in terms of their use of our tools, right? So if I look at, the first one and I evaluate, okay, how are we doing against getting our staff ready? We for years have been using the machine learning, as I alluded to, in the RPA more recently, over the last, call it half a decade. But, with the generative AI tools coming out, over the past 2 years, we've trained over 1,700 of our associates on how to use these tools. That represents over 2/3 of our professional staff, and we're pretty proud of that. So we think we've been on the forefront, and so would say some of the partners that we're leveraging in the space of how we're leaning in on that front. Then you would move into the second phase, which is, okay, well, what are you doing with it? Well, last year we saved, by our estimation, we saved about 100,000 hours across the company. We've got a goal to triple that this year, by the way, by eliminating what we would say is lower value and less necessary work to free up people to do more things in service of creating value for our clients. Again, we think that's a good marker, but another measurement you might look at is, if I looked at January last year versus January this year, we went from having about 200 custom AI-driven workflows that our people were using every day to over 2,800 in 1 year. So, so I think good markers of progress for us there. Not to say that the job is done, because it by no means isn't, but good markers of progress. And then the third prong is, okay, well, what are we doing with our products, right? We've been doing machine learning algorithms for literally like 20 years. The algorithms in our incentives business have gotten so good that, Jack, if you were to go into your local grocery store and be on, if you were to be in one of the, I understand you're in the Northeast, if you were to shop at one of the establishments that we service up there, we service one of the big ones, and you to go 3 times, we would be able to predict with a 95% accuracy rate when you're going to be out of things in your pantry. So we feel pretty good about that, but we're not stopping there. We're continuing to find ways to build, to leverage the LLMs to help us build more precise audience segments in order to be able to get the offers to the right time for consumers shopping for their groceries. We also think that there's incredibly interesting opportunities around using food for health and leveraging the data there with our healthcare patient data, where we're able to lean in with our pharmacy clients. We're starting to experiment with some of our clients on stuff like that. And, we think that that's going to be really a powerful opportunity to drive, again, better outcomes and better use of the dollars for, consumers and patients.
When it comes to AI investments, though, one would imagine you have so many opportunities to choose from, or so many ideas that have been floated coming your way. What is the criteria, or the what allows you to say, yes, let's do this?
Yeah, so what I would say is part of the plan has been we're trying to focus and move our dollars away from things that are less essential and less critical path for our customers. So, we one of the things I think the company has done a good job of over its history, and I would say recently is even taking it up another level, is really getting in and listening deeply with our clients and looking for the overlaps of things that we're hearing in the industries we serve. So we have in the industries we've been talking about, grocery, retail, CPG, and pharmacy, healthcare, we have really deep penetration. We've got over 10,000 clients in total, and we have large market shares in both of those. So, in our healthcare business, we do these things called client advisory boards. In fact, I know our team has got one this week with their retail customers. So we're excited to hear from them. We're excited to see, okay, what are the things that you most deeply are concerned about? So we're trying to use that information as a way to guide where we put our investments. And so we are looking for ways to redirect things away from things that are less essential. And then we do reinvest, right? So as we've been able to grow earnings over the years, and the company has grown tremendously over the last 12, 13 years, we have been able to continue to maintain the percentage of investment, which has been able to grow the pot. So that's kind of been the strategy and our ownership group has been supportive of that type of philosophy. So that's been good.
And how is Inmar using AI to reshape the finance function?
Yeah.
From forecasting to reporting.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are doing a number of very interesting things there. And so I would say that we've got three ways in particular that we're concentrated on. The first one is reporting. The second one is what I would label back office. And then third one I would call insights. And so starting with the reporting, we use generative AI extensively to help us create pretty much all of our reporting in terms of framing up. We feed it the information. We've got custom, workflows that we've created, so it's learning constantly in the LLM. And, we're doing our internal reporting, our external reporting, our board reporting, our lender reporting. We're even going and saying, hey, help us fine tune this. Help us know what questions we're likely to get asked and what the answers, how we should frame up the answers, right? Knowing that the humans behind it are the ones who have to do all the editing, of course, but it's been tremendously helpful on that front. From a back office perspective, we started deploying RPA pretty heavily in the early 2019, 2020 timeline, automated a whole lot of things around cash receipts, AP management, a good number of things around AR, so all of those type of things. We continue to work to hone, the quality and the cleanliness of the data, right, and how we have access to the data. It was interesting. Just this morning, we were in a conversation, and the gentleman who runs our finance IT group sort of presented a reverse picture of how we're planning to deal with that now. And he basically has created a set of tools, some of which are leveraging AI, to be able to accept data in more sloppy formats, and then basically go and generate the data needed to clean it up and to make it a whole data set. And if you would have met this person that was presenting this morning 3 or 4 years ago, that would have never come out of his mouth. But this flip in terms of thinking about, hey, I'm going to make myself a front door that can take what you bring me, and then I'm going to use the tools to make it what I need it to be. It was just tremendous. And I was super proud of this guy this morning and what he was presenting. And I think a lot of the folks in the room were really blown away around what his future picture looks like on that. So those are kind of some of the things in the back office. And then from an insights perspective, I would say this is the area where I'm probably the most proud. So we started creating what I would call a first-class revenue data cube a couple of years ago. And we had an experience with an outside consultant that was really positive about a year and a half, 2 years earlier. And we kind of went on a recruiting mission and got him to come join our firm. And he came in and has really helped one of the guys who's my direct reports build this thing out. And it was a pretty good undertaking. We really got underneath being able to do all of the core things at our fingertips you want to do around churn and ARR tracking and everything else. But then they took it a step further. I said, hey, what would be really cool? It'd be really cool if you didn't actually have to know how to pull this stuff. I said, we need something where you can just ask it questions. And so sure enough, they got with some of our AI guys and they went out and they created an agentic RAG-based application to be able to just use natural language and ask it questions like, who are your top 10 CPG clients for the last 5 years by year? Give me the answer, right? And so they even came up with a pretty cool name. It's called Ernie. So, like earn the money. So,
oh, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Excellent. Well, wonderful overview for us there. We appreciate that. We are up to what we like to refer to as our finance strategic moment. And again, this might have happened anytime during your career. Might have happened 20 years ago. Might have happened last week. But what would you share with us as a finance strategic moment?
You're asked there and the timelines, I think it's important that as finance leaders, we want to be doing strategic work every day, right? And so, I think I could point to things in any of the time horizons, near, medium, or long ago, where hopefully, we could point to things that we're doing that are having a strategic impact, because that really should be the role. We sit in the center of things, and, we need to be able to drive strategic impact for the company to continue to prosper. So, but as I reflect on that, the one that I really look at was at a pivotal moment in the company's history. So, in about 2018, we had completed 8 or 10 acquisitions over a short period of time. We were running on an ERP system that had 32 databases. It was really, really hard to pull the consolidation off of those things, even though they were all part of the same ERP system. But it was just clear to me, at least, and luckily to our CEO at the time, that, it was going to limit our growth. And so we put a proposal together, for an 8-digit spend that to put a new ERP system in. And we hired a firm to come in as part of that project to help us with the selection process. We gave them one requirement. The requirement was this will be a cloud-based system. We will not entertain any premise-based ERP systems, because I knew that this was the one shot that we were going to get to do this. And going on to a cloud-based system, while it was pretty early days then, was going to be the path forward. And so that's what we did. In 2019, we went from that evaluation process, completing it, to live in 9 months in January of 19. We were a couple weeks late getting it turned on, but only a couple weeks, which we thought was pretty good at the time. It was not without bumps in the road. We had plenty of vendors that were getting irritated with us because it took us longer to pay. But I'm happy to say that we didn't lose any clients as a result of it. We didn't have anybody cancel any services with us as a result of it. And we pretty quickly got into, at least as good as we were within probably 60 to 90 days. And then pretty quickly after that, we got a lot better. And so back in those days, it took us 8 to 10 days to close the books, and we were half the size we are now. We now close the books solidly in a 4.5-day cycle, and we're striving to get to 2 days. So we got a little ways to go still, but we couldn't do that without having this tool in place, and the tool has grown with us. The folks we chose to be our partner have lived up to their end of the bargain. They told us that that's where they were driving all their investment. that has proven to be true. They've pretty consistently shown up with upgrades. We have talk about AI, we have a really strong agenda this year on our ERP system for things like forecasting. So you mentioned that earlier. That's definitely a big topic for us. We've been experimenting with LLM forecasting models outside of our ERP system, but we're actually going to be leveraging the models inside the ERP system this year, and we're super excited about that.
So you liked what they introduced, or from what we can tell, many of these platforms are coming forward with all sorts of ideas and enhancements to leverage AI. Mm-hmm. And from your experience, you folks have said, yes, this makes sense. Let's leverage these tools.
We see some really strong opportunities in that forecasting module, as well as a few other places inside of our system. And so, account reconciliation is another one that we think we're going to really be able to drive a lot of efficiency and speed, frankly. And so, we're pretty excited about what the next 12 months hold.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that. We're going to enter what we like to refer to as the mentoring round, and this is where we're going to ask you once more to look back. We want a few more career insights before we end our episode here. You arrived, you've been a CFO since 2014, is it, or what have you? So you've been in the seat quite a while. And the earliest days, though, when you first arrived there, when all that responsibility and, so this is the C-suite. Tell us something about, if you could go back in time, what was the one conversation you wish you had with somebody? What was the piece of advice, if you could go back in time, you'd give yourself?
Wow, that's a really good one. I need to think about that one for a minute. I don't know if it would be one thing, but I think the theme would be communication is paramount, right? Really understanding and making sure that you have good clarity of not only what you're trying to get done, but you've got alignment around around how that's going to happen and what it's going to take to do it. And that there is as few gaps as possible between that alignment and then the plan that comes out of it. When you get to a C-suite level, it can no longer be about you doing the work. It's got to be about you orchestrating the work, right? And you're going to be able to provide the guidance that's really clear about what it is we're trying to get done, what things need to be true when we get it done, what do we need to be able to say, and what are the things that can't be true when we get it done about what we're going to say, right? And so, I think part of the reason that I was able to get the opportunity to be a CFO was I had a pretty good track record of taking things and getting them done. And I got better over the years at delegating. I had good fortune to make a number of pretty good hiring decisions. I made some bad ones too. That would be, I guess, the other piece of advice I would give you is, you're only going to be as good as the folks that surround you. You need to constantly be trying to hire, swing for the fences. Never once when we've hired somebody who we thought was a stretch and then we got them in here have I regretted that. There's been plenty of times, right, when we've hired someone and we've hung on to them too long and then post realized, okay, we made some compromises. We should have made some compromises, and we certainly should have made them for as long as we did. So I guess the two things are, really good clarity and communication and planning, and then two, make sure you surround yourself with, the best talent you possibly can at all times.
You mentioned earlier that, of course, the company's had different owners over time. I'm wondering, as a CFO, whether the opportunity to work closely with different owners, whether that's shaped your mindset when it comes to value creation, how they looked at the business, how that might have altered how you look at the business or think about the business.
Yeah, I think I mentioned earlier that I consider myself to be, someone who really enjoys learning. And so I think the short answer to your question is yes, for sure. They all have influenced my mindset. And some of the things I've adopted and said, hey, this was a really strong practice, and I want to do more of that. And other things I've watched and say, hey, I don't think that's the best practice, and I think we do that some of the time, so we're going to abandon that, right? So I think you can learn both ways, right? You can learn from watching the good, and you can learn from seeing the bad. And I think there's certainly been more good than there has been bad. So I don't want to take that. But, during doing all of these evaluations, you're not only dealing with people at different PE firms, you're also dealing with people on the other side of the aisle, right? And there's opportunity to learn from them as well, right? And so whether that be the people at the PE firms or the people that represent them, and like we use one of the big four public accounting firms to help us with some specific things. And when we first encountered them, right, it was in support of them helping us in a way where it was a unique process, right, that we were using them for. And at the time, that was a little hesitant. And I would tell you they're one of the best partners we have now. On the other front, I've worked with different teams at another firm where I've been exposed to a team on the other side of an equation that I thought was, a poor representation of how you do things, and then used teams of my own with them, or been exposed to other teams where it was not, right? And so you'd be surprised at, how individual some of the time those experiences can be. And, I think there's learning to be had all along the way.
All along the way. So we do like to ask our guests to reflect a little on the personal side with us, Rich. Is there something, hard to believe that you've been there 26 years and there's anything your colleagues might not know about you, but is there something most people don't know about you, some interest that you have, something, pursuit, that you had in the past? Don't know. Anything come to mind?
I don't know. I tend to be, I think most people that know me pretty well here would tell you that I'm a pretty open
Just
guy.
Don't say you're an open book. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm pretty open communicator. It's probably got to do with, my roots are up there in the Northeast too. So, tend to be a little more vociferous, but, I would say the things that may not be quite as appreciated is, I'm super passionate about my people and mentoring the folks, not only that work for me, but that I work with here at the company. And I think, I think as a CFO, that's not always something that people anticipate or expect. And I would say that honestly, that's one of my biggest passions. And so, so I'd probably say that would be the thing that maybe is a little bit unexpected for folks.
What about a book selection, or maybe just a resource for us, something that's influenced your thinking?
It's interesting. So I mentioned my father earlier, being an engineer. He, or at least I think I did. I think that was something I said earlier, but, he also, he's kind of a lifelong learner himself. He's got a master's degree in engineering and one in finance. So that's probably how I ended up where I did. But he got a finance MBA and decided that he wanted to start being basically his new hobby became being his own investment guidance. And so I promise I'm getting to the book here. He was one of Schwab's early clients. And so he's been fascinated with Charles Schwab since like 1990. So a few years ago, he gave me a book called Invested by Charles Schwab. And, it's really about the story of how Schwab came to be, right? How that company was born in the 70s, believe it or not. And, we were talking about the things that Inmar was doing with technology in the early 80s. Well, Charles Schwab was doing some unbelievable thing in the 70s with technology. And he reinvented the business of investing, and he made it ubiquitously available to the common man and woman. And he kept reinventing, and the number of times that he had to go out and find capital and then find more capital, and then how he invested the capital back in the business, lost lots of money, by the way, for a lot of years, and continued to invest in the technology to make the services better. He listened to his clients. He listened to the folks that worked for him that were dealing with his clients, and he kept plowing it back in. He did. He revolutionized the industry. And so I read that book not too long ago. I finally got through it this summer, and I was amazed at how many great lessons there were in there for how to think about growing an entity, and how important it was to continually innovate and reinvent yourself, how important it was to make sure you had the capital you needed to do it, how important it was to listen to your customer and constantly be raising the bar in terms of how you deliver what you deliver to them. And the fact that you can't rest on your laurels. Like, the minute you rest on your laurels, somebody's going to knock you off the block. And so it was, when I opened the book and I was about maybe a third of the way through, I was like, oh, well, this is just a short story about, his company. But it really wasn't. It was really a manifesto on how to continually grow and create a thriving enterprise, and the importance. Even talks really highly in there a ton about the importance of having the right people in the right roles and how that makes or breaks you. And so it really it ended up being a really great reminder of what I would say are really important principles. And as a CFO, I very much view it as part of my responsibility to make sure that we are thinking about those things and that we have the right capital resources and the right human resources across the enterprise in place in order to keep the company healthy. And that's on behalf of all of our stakeholders, whether it be our owners or our 4,000 plus employees.
Nice. Great selection for us. We haven't had it before. I can mention that. So we're always happy to get a new volume. So thank you for that. Hey, we're up to our last question. We're going to ask you to look forward finally. And we're wondering about your priorities, Rich, as a CFO for the coming 12 months. What would those be?
Yeah. So within the finance function, I would say my priorities are largely hinged on the things that I was discussing earlier around further adoption of AI and efficiency and speed. I have a big belief that speed is enhancing our leadership's ability to make quality decisions. I believe the efficiency is enabling us to be able to support growth, right? So we have to continue to be more efficient so that as the growth comes, not only can our systems and our tools handle it, but we have the people to handle it without having to continue to grow our staff tremendously, right? So I think that's one aspect of it. And I think from a business perspective, our priorities really are around continuing to enhance our ability to commercialize new products, right? So we see real opportunities in both of our industries to bring more solutions to our clients, to solve these hard problems. And our ability to support that and to get better at developing the tools and then getting them out to our customers is a key priority that, it's not something that I'm just focused on as the CFO, but it's something that the company is, widely focused on as a leadership group. And I'm certainly, a huge proponent of that. So,
Rich Schmidt, thank you for joining us on CFO Thought Leader.
Thank you, Jack. Appreciate you having me.